gold digger shames poor waiter at restaurant, lives to regret it. The crystal chandeliers of Elysium cast a golden glow over the restaurant's pristine white tablecloths. It was Friday evening, and Manhattan's elite had descended upon the city's newest culinary hotspot, where reservations were backed up for months and the cheapest bottle of wine cost more than most people's weekly salary. Evelyn Blake's laughter cut through the refined murmur of conversation like expensive crystal striking marble. She tossed her salon-perfect chestnut hair over one shoulder, the movement calculated to draw attention to the diamond pendant nestled at her collarbone, a gift from an oil executive she dated last spring. "Antonio, darling, you simply must try the caviar here," she purred, placing a manicured hand on her date's Armani-clad arm. "My friend Isabel says the chef imports it directly from the Caspian Sea." Antonio Russo, real estate mogul and Evelyn's target for the evening, smiled indulgently. He was newly divorced, flush with cash, and, most importantly to Evelyn, in need of someone beautiful to make his ex-wife jealous at upcoming charity galas. "Whatever pleases you, Bella," he replied, eyes lingering on her décolletage rather than her face. Evelyn had spent 3 hours preparing for tonight. Her Louboutins were new, her dress was Versace, and her strategy was foolproof. 6 months of careful research had led her to Antonio. He was worth 9 figures, loved showing off, and had a weakness for women who made him feel important. Child's play for someone with Evelyn's skills. "Excuse me," a quiet voice said from beside their table. "Would you care to hear tonight's specials?" Evelyn turned, ready to dismiss whoever had interrupted her carefully orchestrated flirtation, and found herself looking at a waiter. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind green eyes and a composed demeanor that seemed at odds with his station. His black uniform was impeccable, but his hands, though clean, showed signs of work, and his haircut was pedestrian at best. His name tag read Daniel. "We'll have champagne first," Evelyn said without acknowledging his question, her tone dropping 10 degrees. "Dom Perignon, 2008. "An excellent choice," Daniel replied with a gracious nod. "Would you prefer?" "Just bring it." She cut him off, turning back to Antonio. "Where were we?" But Antonio, who had built his fortune through ruthless business tactics yet maintained surprisingly cordial relationships with service staff, frowned slightly. "The specials sound good, no? Perhaps we should hear them." Daniel smiled, his expression betraying nothing but professional courtesy. "Tonight's chef's creation is a seared Hokkaido scallop with black truffle emulsion and... Did I ask for your life story?" Evelyn interjected with a dismissive wave. "Just the champagne. And make sure the glasses are properly chilled this time." A flicker, just a moment's shadow, passed behind Daniel's eyes. It wasn't anger exactly, but something more complex, recognition, perhaps, of a familiar type. Yet his voice remained steady. "Of course, ma'am. Right away." As Daniel walked away, Antonio raised an eyebrow. "He seems like a nice fellow." Evelyn scoffed. "Please. Men like that belong behind counters, not next to me. Can you imagine showing up at the Met Gala with someone who probably lives in a shoebox apartment in Queens?" She said it loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, her voice carrying precisely the distance she intended. A couple at the next table exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Success is about climbing the ladder, Antonio," she continued, leaning forward to give him a better view of her necklace, and what lay beneath it. "I've worked hard to position myself where I am. Why would I waste time with someone who hasn't done the same?" Antonio's smile faded slightly, but he rallied quickly, business instincts telling him to avoid conflict with a beautiful woman in public. "Everyone has their path, no? My father started as a bricklayer, and wisely moved beyond it," Evelyn replied smoothly. "That's my point exactly." When Daniel returned with the champagne, his movements were practiced and elegant. He presented the bottle, opened it with perfect technique, no ostentatious pop, just a controlled sigh of escaping pressure, and poured 2 flawless glasses. "Would you care to taste it first, sir?" he asked Antonio. The real estate mogul nodded appreciatively at the professional service. "Thank you, no need. I trust your expertise." Evelyn rolled her eyes. It's not rocket science. He's just pouring drinks. Daniel's face remained professionally blank, but something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, as he finished serving. As he stepped back, Evelyn's hand brushed her water glass, sending it toppling toward her new dress. With reflexes that seemed surprisingly quick for a mere waiter, Daniel caught the glass midair, preventing the spill with barely a drop lost. "Careful, ma'am," he said quietly. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Daniel's held neither resentment nor servility, just a calm assessment that made Evelyn strangely uncomfortable, as though he were seeing through her carefully constructed facade. "Well, that's your job, isn't it?" she said, regaining her composure. "To clean up messes?" A nearby diner audibly inhaled at the rudeness. Daniel simply inclined his head in a small nod. "Indeed it is, Ms. Blake. Will you be ready to order soon, or would you like more time?" Evelyn froze momentarily. "How do you know my name?" A subtle smile touched Daniel's lips. "The reservation, of course. Blake, party of two." He turned to Antonio. "And Mr. Russo, I believe? Your reputation precedes you." Antonio grinned, flattered. "You follow real estate?" "I take an interest in many fields," Daniel replied enigmatically. Throughout the meal, Daniel's service remained impeccable despite Evelyn's continued barbs. When she complained that her steak was overcooked, it wasn't. He arranged for a new one without argument. When she, accidentally, dropped her napkin for him to retrieve, he did so with dignity. When she loudly commented to Antonio about people who would never amount to anything, Daniel simply refreshed their water with steady hands. By dessert, even Antonio seemed uncomfortable with her behavior, his earlier appreciation of her beauty diminished by her persistent cruelty. As Daniel presented the check, Antonio stepped away to take a phone call. In his absence, Evelyn's mask slipped further. "I hope the service charge is worth it," she said, examining the leather folder. "Though I suppose for you, this is as good as it gets." Daniel looked at her directly then, his calm gaze unwavering. "We all have different measures of success, Ms. Blake," he said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Something in his tone, not condescension, but something like pity, infuriated Evelyn more than any retort could have. Before she could respond, Antonio returned, quickly settled the bill with a generous tip, and guided her toward the exit. As they left, Evelyn glanced back once. Through the restaurant's elegant interior, she caught a final glimpse of Daniel. He was speaking with a distinguished older woman at another table, who was listening to him with unmistakable respect. For a fraction of a second, Evelyn felt a strange unease, as though she'd missed something important. Then Antonio's hand found the small of her back, and she remembered her mission for the evening. Whatever that waiter's story was, it hardly mattered. She had bigger fish to fry, 9-figure fish, and Daniel Rivers would soon be nothing but a forgettable footnote in her unstoppable ascent to the life she deserved. She had no way of knowing how wrong she was. The penthouse apartment on Central Park West bore little resemblance to the shoebox in Queens that Evelyn had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering Manhattan skyline as Daniel Rivers loosened his tie and tossed his restaurant name tag onto a minimalist glass console table. "Rough night?" asked Jerome Stone, looking up from his laptop at the kitchen island. Daniel sighed, pouring himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan. "The usual entitled clientele. One woman in particular seemed determined to remind me of my place in the social hierarchy." Jerome chuckled. If only she knew she was insulting the man who just acquired a controlling stake in Lux Media Group. "That's precisely why I do this, Jerome." Daniel took a thoughtful sip of his scotch. "The monthly reminder of how people behave when they think you're nobody." The truth was far from Evelyn's contemptuous assumptions. At 35, Daniel Rivers was the founder and CEO of Rivers & Stone Capital, a venture capital firm that had quietly become one of the most influential players in tech, fashion, and luxury markets. Worth well over $8 billion, Daniel operated with a discretion that kept him off Forbes lists and away from society photographers. He walked to his home office, where a wall of monitors displayed portfolio performances, market trends, and surveillance feeds from his various properties. With a gesture, he brought up the day's numbers, another $40 million in growth across his investments. "Did you make the transfer to the Children's Hospital?" he asked Jerome, who had followed him in. "Done this morning." "Anonymous, as always." Daniel nodded. 5 years ago, the same hospital had treated his younger sister through a brutal fight with leukemia. Though they'd lost her in the end, Daniel had never forgotten the dignity with which the staff had treated his family when they were still struggling financially. "What did the charming woman at the restaurant say exactly?" Jerome asked, leaning against the doorframe. Daniel's mouth tightened. "Men like that belong behind counters, not next to me." Direct quote. It wasn't the first time Daniel had encountered such attitudes during his monthly service jobs. After making his first billion at 30, he'd instituted a personal policy. 1 week every month, he worked in frontline service positions at businesses his firm might invest in. Waiter, barista, retail clerk, whatever gave him insight into customer behavior and kept him connected to reality. His partners thought it was eccentric. The financial press would have called it extraordinary if they knew. But for Daniel, it was essential. His father had been a janitor who worked double shifts to put food on the table. His mother had cleaned hotel rooms while battling chronic pain. He'd never forget where he came from, even as his net worth soared. The way she treated the other staff was worse. Daniel continued, bringing up his calendar for the next day. Like they were furniture. Invisible until she needed something, then suddenly worthy of her annoyance. Jerome nodded knowingly. "Your sister would have loved watching you serve champagne to Manhattan's elite." Daniel smiled at the thought. Laura would indeed have found it hilarious. Her brilliant, intense brother playing at being ordinary. She'd been his moral compass, the one who'd always insisted that treating people with dignity was non-negotiable, regardless of their station. "What was the woman's name?" "The rude one?" Jerome asked casually. "Evelyn Blake," Daniel replied, the name already filed away in his systematic memory. "She was with Antonio Russo." "Russo?" Jerome raised an eyebrow. "Interesting choice. His divorce was only finalized last month." "She'd done her homework," Daniel acknowledged. "Knew exactly which buttons to push. I've seen her type before, strategic social climber." She mentioned having a startup of some kind. Jerome tapped something into his tablet. "Evelyn Blake, Trying to launch a skincare line. Evermore Beauty. Heavy on influencer marketing, light on actual innovation. Another luxury brand built on smoke and mirrors," Daniel muttered. He'd seen hundreds of pitches like this, entrepreneurs more interested in the lifestyle than the product. He dismissed the thought and turned to tomorrow's meetings. Evelyn Blake was just another entitled socialite, not worth further consideration. In a city full of ambitious people mistaking wealth for worth, she was merely one more cautionary example of values gone astray. What Daniel couldn't have known, as he reviewed acquisition proposals for actual innovative companies, was that Evelyn Blake's path and his were set to cross again, in circumstances that would strip away her carefully constructed facade and teach her the most expensive lesson of her career. As he closed his laptop for the night, Daniel thought briefly of the flash of contempt in Evelyn's eyes when she looked at his waiter's uniform. He felt a momentary pang of something like pity. People who measured others solely by their apparent status were doomed to a life of shallow connections and missed opportunities. Little did he know how soon that lesson would come home to roost for Ms. Evelyn Blake. "Ladies, your girl is officially on her way to the top," Evelyn announced, raising her mimosa glass in triumph. The Sunday brunch table at the Clement erupted in practiced squeals of delight from her 3 closest friends, or rather, her most useful social connections. Sophia, daughter of a cosmetics mogul, leaned forward. "Spill everything. What happened with Antonio after dinner?" Evelyn waved dismissively. "Antonio was just an appetizer, darling. The main course is much more substantial." She slid her phone across the table, displaying an email with a prestigious letterhead. "Rivers and Stone Capital. They want to meet about my skincare line." The reaction was immediate: raised eyebrows, impressed nods, and envious glances. Rivers and Stone was notoriously selective, backing only 1 in every 1,000 pitches they received. "How did you even get your foot in the door?" asked Madison, who'd been trying unsuccessfully to get funding for her organic pet food startup for months. Evelyn's smile was razor-sharp. "I have my ways." The truth was simpler and less impressive. After her dinner with Antonio, which had ended with a perfunctory kiss and vague promises to do it again sometime, Evelyn had spent the weekend meticulously preparing her application to every major venture capital firm in New York. Rivers and Stone was a long shot, but she'd included them anyway. Their portfolio of luxury brands was exactly where Evermore Beauty belonged. What she'd never tell her friends was how she'd stayed up until 4 a.m. perfecting her pitch deck, replacing actual financial projections with aspirational graphs and compensating for her product's lack of scientific backing with glossy influencer testimonials. The skincare line itself was little more than generic creams and expensive packaging, but Evelyn knew what sold wasn't the product, it was the lifestyle. "According to my research," she continued, signaling for another round of mimosas, "they've backed 3 beauty startups that were acquired for 9 figures each. One board member alone is worth $8 billion. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And he's single. Always working 2 angles." Sophia laughed. "Business and pleasure." Evelyn didn't correct her. In her world, they were one and the same. Back in her apartment, a 1-bedroom in Murray Hill stretched far beyond her means, Evelyn opened her laptop and added the final touches to her presentation. Her entire future hinged on this meeting. Her credit cards were maxed out, her rent was 3 weeks overdue, and Antonio had stopped returning her texts after a background check had revealed her financial situation wasn't quite what she'd implied. "These money guys are easy to impress," she muttered to herself, switching out a photo of her actual small-batch production facility, her bathroom, for a stock image of a sleek laboratory. "Flash them some confidence, a bit of cleavage, and numbers they want to hear." She posted a carefully staged photo to her Instagram, designer heels propped on a coffee table, laptop displaying her company logo, and caption, "When you're about to bag the biggest investors in NYC. #female founder, #boss babe, #billionaire's mindset." The likes and comments poured in, feeding the illusion she'd crafted so carefully. No one needed to know that the office was her apartment, the team was just her, or that the clinically proven results were completely fabricated. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected mercy. The callback she'd been desperately hoping for came through. Rivers and Stone wanted to see her Thursday at 2 p.m., not with an associate, but with a board member. "Ms. Blake?" the polished voice of the executive assistant said over the phone. "We've reviewed your materials and one of our principals would like to meet with you personally." Evelyn nearly dropped the phone. That's wonderful. May I ask which principal?" "Mr. Rivers himself will be evaluating your proposal, along with several board members." The founder. The billionaire. The kingmaker of luxury startups. Evelyn's heart raced. "I'll be there," she managed to say with forced composure. After hanging up, she screamed into a pillow with genuine excitement. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. She spent her last $600 on a new outfit, investment dressing, she rationalized. She rehearsed her pitch until she could deliver it in her sleep. She researched everything publicly available about Rivers and Stone's portfolio companies, looking for patterns in what they funded. Curiously, there was almost no information about Daniel Rivers himself. No photos in the press, no profiles in business magazines, no social media presence. Just whispers of his brilliance, and his ruthless eye for authenticity in the brands he backed. Perfect, Evelyn thought as she applied her makeup Thursday morning. A blank slate rich guy. Those are the easiest to read. As her Uber approached the gleaming tower housing Rivers and Stone Capital, Evelyn checked her reflection one last time. The woman who gazed back at her projected everything she wanted the world to see: confidence, success, and ambition without desperation. No one would guess that underneath her $800 blazer beat the heart of a woman on the financial edge, one rejection away from disaster. Rivers and Stone Capital. announced the driver. Looks fancy. It's about to be my new best friend, Evelyn replied, stepping out into the bright spring day, unaware that she was walking directly into a reckoning she never saw coming. The 50th floor of the Obsidian Tower exuded power and exclusivity. As Evelyn stepped off the elevator into the reception area of Rivers and Stone Capital, she allowed herself a moment to absorb it all. The sweeping views of Manhattan, the tasteful modern art, the subtle scent of success in the air. Ms. Blake? A poised receptionist approached. They're ready for you in the Azure conference room. Evelyn nodded, adjusting her posture to project the confidence of someone who belonged in these rarefied surroundings. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, the triumphant entry, the impressed faces of investors, the beginning of her ascent into genuine wealth rather than its carefully maintained illusion. Your presentation is loaded and ready, the receptionist continued, leading her down a corridor lined with subtle lighting that highlighted photographs of Rivers and Stone's success stories. Water or coffee? Water, please, Evelyn replied, her mouth suddenly dry. The stakes couldn't be higher. Her apartment's grace period ended tomorrow. Her last credit card had been declined that morning. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was salvation. The receptionist stopped at a frosted glass door. Good luck, she said with a professional smile before opening it. Evelyn stepped into the Azure conference room, her pitch-perfect introduction already forming on her lips. Then she froze, the carefully crafted words evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Seated at the head of the polished conference table, wearing an impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit instead of a waiter's uniform, was Daniel Rivers. The same man she had demeaned and dismissed at Elysium just days before. Their eyes met across the expanse of gleaming mahogany. In his, she saw clear recognition, and something worse, not anger, but a calm, measured assessment. Ms. Blake, he said, rising from his chair with the same fluid grace he'd shown while serving champagne. Thank you for coming in today. The blood drained from Evelyn's face. Around the table sat 6 other board members, all watching with curious expressions as their normally reserved founder greeted the newest startup hopeful. Evelyn stuttered, her brain frantically recalibrating. Mr. Rivers. What a surprise. Is it? He asked mildly. Please have a seat. I believe you have a presentation for us? She moved to the chair indicated, her designer heels suddenly unsteady beneath her. This had to be a cosmic joke, or a nightmare. The waiter she had humiliated was Daniel Rivers? The billionaire venture capitalist who controlled her future? I didn't recognize you at the restaurant, she blurted, attempting damage control with a nervous laugh. What an incredible coincidence. Daniel's expression remained neutral. Not coincidence, Ms. Blake. I regularly work in service positions at establishments we're considering for investment. It provides valuable perspective. One of the board members nodded. Daniel's monthly field research is legendary. He's discovered some of our best investments that way. Evelyn's mind raced. How badly had she misjudged the situation? How irreparably had she damaged her chances before the meeting had even begun? That's fascinating, she managed. Very humble of you. I find humility and success aren't mutually exclusive, Daniel replied. But we're here to discuss Evermore Beauty, not my work habits. Please begin your presentation. With trembling hands, Evelyn launched into her pitch, but the confident delivery she'd practiced had abandoned her. Every time she glanced at Daniel, she remembered her cutting words. Men like that belong behind counters, not next to me. How those words must sound to him now, a man worth billions who chose to work service jobs to stay grounded. She stumbled through market analyses, tripped over projected revenue figures, and watched as the board members exchanged glances that grew increasingly skeptical. Her fabricated numbers suddenly seemed transparent under Daniel's steady gaze, the same gaze that had assessed her so calmly as she'd belittled him. When she finished, the room fell into uncomfortable silence. Interesting approach, Daniel finally said. Before we discuss the business aspects, I have one question. He leaned forward slightly. Your Instagram post mentioned bagging big investors. Is that how you view this process? As a conquest? Heat flooded Evelyn's face. That was marketing language. Social media requires a certain tone. I see. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. And do you believe your product's claimed clinically proven results would stand up to the due diligence our science team would conduct? The pointed question struck at the heart of her deception. The room seemed to shrink around her as she realized that Daniel wasn't just addressing her business proposal. He was methodically exposing every corner of her carefully constructed facade. We have preliminary studies. She hedged, knowing full well that her studies consisted of testimonials from friends who'd received free samples. Daniel consulted a tablet before him. Preliminary studies conducted in your laboratory? He turned the screen toward her, displaying a photo of her bathroom with mixing bowls and unmarked ingredients spread across the counter. Our research team is quite thorough. Evelyn's stomach dropped. They'd investigated her already. They knew everything. Her maxed-out credit cards, her overdue rent, her non-existent team, her fabricated credentials. And worst of all, they knew exactly how she treated people when she thought they were beneath her. As the reality of her situation crashed down around her, Evelyn realized that this meeting had never been about investment potential. It had always been about something far more valuable, a lesson in human dignity that she was learning too late. I think we've seen enough of the presentation, Daniel said, gesturing for the lights to be raised. The board members closed their portfolios almost in unison, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed disdain. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. This wasn't how the meeting was supposed to go. She'd counted on dazzling them with confidence and charm, not being systematically exposed as a fraud by the very man she'd humiliated. Ms. Blake, Daniel continued, his voice measured and calm. At Rivers and Stone, we have a philosophy that guides our investment decisions. Would you care to guess what it is? She swallowed hard. Maximizing returns? That's the outcome, not the philosophy. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same quiet assessment she'd seen at the restaurant. We believe that the character of a founder is the single greatest predictor of a company's success. Technical expertise can be hired. Market conditions can change. But character, that's fundamental. One of the board members, an elegant woman in her 60s, nodded. We've turned down technically brilliant proposals because we couldn't trust the founders. And we've backed seemingly risky ventures because we believed in the people behind them. Evelyn's throat tightened. My character isn't reflected in one bad day. It isn't about one bad day, Daniel interrupted gently. It's about patterns of behavior. How you treat people when you think they can't benefit you reveals far more than how you behave in this boardroom. He stood and walked to the window, Manhattan sprawling below like a glittering promise. When you came into Elysium that night, you made a series of calculations. You decided that Antonio Russo was worth your respect because of his wealth and connections. You decided I was worth your contempt because you assumed I had neither. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know who you were. Exactly my point. Daniel turned to face her directly. You shouldn't need to know someone's net worth to treat them with basic human dignity. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn felt each heartbeat like a countdown to disaster. What does this mean for my proposal? She finally asked, her voice small. Daniel returned to his seat. We invest in people who understand value, especially the human kind. Unfortunately, you failed that test. The finality in his tone sent ice through her veins. But my business plan has significant holes, said Jerome Stone, speaking for the first time. Your financial projections are unsupported. Your scientific claims are unverified. And your market analysis overestimates potential penetration by roughly 400%. Not to mention, added the elegant woman, 3 of your listed partner manufacturers have confirmed they've never heard of Evermore Beauty. It was a wholesale dismantling of everything Evelyn had presented. Every exaggeration, every fabrication, every instance of wishful thinking masquerading as business strategy, all laid bare under the unflinching scrutiny of people who'd built their careers on separating substance from illusion. This meeting was never about investment, was it? Evelyn realized aloud. Daniel shook his head. We determined that before you walked in. But I believe in giving people the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. And the lesson is what? Don't be rude to waiters because they might secretly be billionaires, Evelyn said bitterly. No, Daniel replied, something like disappointment flashing in his eyes. The lesson is that how you treat anyone reflects how you'll treat everyone, eventually. Including investors, partners, and customers. He closed his portfolio with a soft finality. The cosmetics industry is built on relationships. Did you know that Antonio Russo sits on the board of Lux Distribution Group? Evelyn paled. Lux controlled access to premium retail channels, essential for any high-end beauty product. He called me yesterday, concerned about a potential investment we might be making. Apparently, your behavior at dinner left quite an impression. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but his words landed like body blows. Word travels fast in these circles. The implications crashed over her like a wave. Not only was she losing this opportunity, but doors across the industry might already be closing. I deserve another chance, she pleaded. Everyone makes mistakes. Indeed they do, Daniel agreed. And the wisdom to learn from them is what separates success from failure. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Our decision stands. We won't be investing in Evermore Beauty. As the board members filed out, Evelyn remained frozen in her chair, the fragments of her dreams scattered around her like broken glass. The elegant woman paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly. I was a waitress for 6 years before starting my first company. Now I'm worth 9 figures. She glanced at the presentation still displayed on the screen. Your product concept isn't bad. But success requires substance beneath the packaging, in products and in people. Daniel was the last to leave. Ms. Blake, he said from the doorway. Despite what you might think, I take no pleasure in this outcome. Everyone deserves dignity, even those who deny it to others. With that, he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone in the cavernous conference room, facing the ruins of what might have been, and the dawning realization that her greatest obstacle had never been lack of connections or funding. It had been herself. 3 months had passed since the disastrous meeting at Rivers and Stone Capital. Summer had descended on Manhattan, bringing suffocating heat that matched the crushing weight of Evelyn's new reality. Gone was the luxury apartment in Murray Hill, replaced by a shared walk-up in Bushwick with 2 roommates she barely spoke to. Gone were the designer clothes, most sold online to cover immediate expenses. Gone were their friends, who disappeared faster than champagne at a gallery opening once they realized she had no more connections to offer. Evelyn checked her watch as she arranged small sample jars on a folding table outside a modest storefront. The sign above read, Evermore Beauty, in simple, unadorned letters, a far cry from the elegant branding she'd once envisioned. The pop-up shop was all she could afford now, a week-long rental in a transitional neighborhood, paid for with the last of her savings and a reluctant loan from her younger sister. Free samples. Natural skincare for real people, she called to passing pedestrians, most of whom hurried by without a second glance. The rejection at Rivers and Stone had been just the beginning. Somehow, though she never learned exactly how, word had spread through New York's tightly knit investment community about both her fabricated business plan and her treatment of service staff. One by one, doors had closed. Calls went unreturned. Emails disappeared into the void. Without funding, she'd been forced to scale back everything. The fancy packaging gave way to simple glass jars with printed labels. The exaggerated claims of revolutionary formula were replaced by honest descriptions of natural ingredients. Most painfully, the glamorous founder narrative she'd constructed had crumbled, leaving only the unvarnished truth. She was just another struggling entrepreneur hoping for a break. Excuse me, is this all locally sourced? Asked an older woman, examining one of the sample jars. Evelyn nodded, summoning a genuine smile. Yes, everything's made in small batches right here in New York. Would you like to try the lavender night cream? It's my most popular formula. The woman tested the cream on her wrist, nodded approvingly, and purchased a jar, Evelyn's third sale of the day. It wasn't much, but it was honest money, something she'd nearly forgotten the value of in her desperate climb toward artificial success. As the woman walked away, Evelyn noticed a familiar figure approaching from the corner of her eye. Her heart stuttered as recognition dawned. Walking down the street in a casual linen shirt and sunglasses was Daniel Rivers. She froze, unsure whether to hide, pretend not to see him, or acknowledge him. Before she could decide, he was there, standing before her modest display of skincare products. For a long moment neither spoke. Evelyn felt heat rising in her cheeks, remembering their last encounter and everything that had followed. But there was no judgment in his expression as he surveyed her small business operation, just that same quiet assessment she'd first encountered at the restaurant. "Ms. Blake," he said finally, with a small nod of recognition. "Mr. Rivers," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect to see you here." He picked up one of the sample jars, reading the ingredient list with genuine interest. "I'm investing in a boutique hotel on this block. Thought I'd explore the neighborhood." He glanced at her storefront. "Pop-up shop?" "Yes." Evelyn swallowed her pride. It's all I could manage after everything." Daniel nodded, still examining the product. "No synthetic fragrances, no parabens, locally sourced botanicals. This is actually a solid formulation." The simple, professional assessment, free from mockery or condescension, caught her off guard. "Thank you. I reformulated everything. Started from scratch." A young couple approached the table, and Evelyn excused herself to help them. She explained the products with none of the excessive claims or manufactured hype she'd once relied on, just straightforward information about ingredients and benefits. They purchased 2 items before continuing on their way. When she turned back, Daniel was watching her with an unexpected hint of approval. "You've changed your approach," he observed. Evelyn nodded, looking down. "I had to change everything. The way I did business. The way I treated people." She met his gaze directly for the first time. "You were right about me. About all of it." Daniel said nothing, but his expression softened slightly. "I lost everything," she continued, "but maybe that's what needed to happen. I'm building something real now. It's small, it's slow, but it's honest." He placed the jar back on the table and reached for his wallet. "I'll take one of each," he said, gesturing to her product line. "You don't have to do that," Evelyn said quickly. "I'm not doing charity, Ms. Blake. I'm making a purchase based on product quality." He handed her a credit card. "That's how business should work." As she processed his payment, Evelyn felt something shift inside her, not the artificial excitement of chasing status, but something quieter and more substantial. For the first time in years, she felt the dignity of earning something on merit alone. Daniel accepted the small bag of products with a nod. Before turning to leave, he paused. "The most successful people I know have all failed spectacularly at least once. The difference is what they built from those ruins." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the flow of pedestrians on the sunny street. Evelyn watched him go, her former tormentor turned unlikely catalyst. She looked at her modest display, her simple products, her honest work. It wasn't the empire she dreamed of, but it was hers, built on substance rather than illusion. As she arranged her samples for the next potential customer, Evelyn realized that she'd gained something more valuable than an investment. She'd found her way back to the person she might have been all along, before ambition had curdled into avarice. It wasn't the ending she'd planned, but perhaps it was the beginning she needed.